The call came in on a Tuesday morning, and I almost didn't pick up. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, with a half-eaten bowl of oatmeal, going cold in front of me, staring at the rain coming down the window like I didn't have anywhere to be. I didn't, really. Retired men don't have anywhere to be. That's the part they don't tell you about retirement, that the days stop having edges. I picked up because I recognized the number. My son. "Hey, Dad." 2 words, and I already knew something was off. There's a version of "Hey, Dad" that means he's calling just to call. This wasn't that version. This one had weight behind it. "What's going on?" I said. He said he was just checking in. We talked for about 4 minutes about nothing, the weather out there, whether I'd gotten the gutters cleaned before winter, whether my knee was still giving me trouble. All the small talk that fathers and sons use to warm up to the real thing. I answered his questions. I asked a few of my own, and the whole time I was thinking, he's going to say it in a minute. Give him a minute. He said it. "Becca and I were thinking about doing the baby shower as kind of a small thing," he said. "Just her side, you know. Her college friends, her mom's people. I wanted to let you know so you didn't feel like you were, I don't know, surprised." I remember looking at the rain on the window for a moment without saying anything. I said. "It's not a big deal, Dad. It's just the kind of thing where Becca wanted it to feel like, you know, her space. Her space. My son's first child, my first grandchild, and I was being told about it in advance so I wouldn't feel surprised to be excluded from it." "All right," I said. "I understand." We said a few more things and then we hung up. I sat there with the phone face down on the table, and I ate the rest of my oatmeal, which was cold and had been cold for 15 minutes. I ate every bite of it. I didn't know what else to do. I should back up. Because you can't understand what that phone call meant without knowing what came before it. My son Elliot, and I say this as his father, so take it for whatever it's worth, is a good man who has always had a weak spot for whoever loves him most in the room. When he was a kid, that was me. When he was in high school, it was his football coach, a big man named Pruitt, who used to pat him on the shoulder and tell him he had real leadership quality. When he went to college, it was a series of professors and mentors and friends who he would talk about with this particular shine in his eyes, like he'd found the person who finally really got him. I never begrudged him any of that. A man who people want to influence is a man people find worth influencing. You can't be too angry about that. But then he met Becca, and the center of gravity shifted in a way I hadn't quite experienced before. I met her at a dinner he arranged at a restaurant downtown, about 8 months after they started dating. She was beautiful in a very specific way, the kind of beautiful that seems deliberate, that communicates an awareness of itself. She had a handshake that was firmer than I expected, and when she looked around the restaurant, she did it the way people do when they've been to better restaurants and are quietly noting the differences. She came from money. That was clear within the first few minutes. Her father had done well in commercial real estate, somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, and her mother had that particular confidence that comes from never having had to ask the price of anything. I don't say this as a criticism, I'm just telling you what I observed. I grew up working class. My father drove a delivery truck for 32 years. I put myself through a state school on loans and a part-time job at a hardware store. I spent 30 years as a facilities manager for a hospital system, which is not glamorous work but is real work, the kind that keeps buildings standing and patients warm. I owned a modest house in a modest neighborhood, and I was proud of it, and I still am. Becca was polite to me at that dinner. She laughed at the right moments and asked questions about my work history, with an expression of genuine interest that was, I thought, perhaps slightly too practiced to be genuine. She said, "That's so interesting," at least 3 times. She made eye contact in a way that felt like a skill. My wife, God rest her soul, would have known exactly what to make of her. Marilyn had a gift for that. She could read a room in about 45 seconds flat, and she would have leaned over to me afterward in the car and said quietly, "That one is trouble, Lou." She would have said it without rancor, just as a statement of fact, the way she said most things. But Marilyn was gone by then. She passed 4 years ago from a cardiac event that nobody saw coming, including her. She was 61 years old. I was 63. I still reach for the phone sometimes to tell her things. So I didn't have Marilyn's read on Becca, and I spent a long time convincing myself that my own unease was just grief making me suspicious of anyone who might take her place in Elliot's life. That's a real thing. I know that now. but it was a convenient explanation that let me ignore some signals I probably should have paid attention to. Over the next 2 years, Elliot and Becca got engaged, got married, and got pregnant, in that order, which I mention not because the order matters, but because the pace of it meant there was never quite enough time between milestones to stop and evaluate anything. Life was just happening, and my job, as I understood it, was to be supportive and present, and not to make anything more difficult than it already was. I gave them money. I want to be clear about that up front, because it's relevant. When they got engaged, I gave Elliot $20,000 to help with the wedding. Not a loan, a gift. I didn't put conditions on it. I wrote the check and handed it over, and I told him I was proud of him, and that his mother would have been too. When they moved into their apartment, a very nice apartment in a part of the city that runs about $3,500 a month, they were short on the security deposit. Elliot called me. I covered it. Another $5,000. When Becca's car needed to be replaced, and her credit wasn't in the position she needed it to be in for a good rate, I co-signed. I want to be honest here and say that the co-signing made me nervous, but Elliot assured me it was just a formality, and that they would handle the payments, and they did, so that one didn't cost me anything except sleep for about 6 months. There were smaller things over the years. A medical bill here, a utilities situation there. Once, after Christmas, they were running behind on a credit card that had gotten away from them, and Becca called me directly to ask if I could help. She didn't call Elliot first and have him ask me. She called me herself. I remember thinking that was bold. I also remember thinking that I admired the directness of it, and I paid the bill. It added up to somewhere north of $40,000 over about 3 years. I am not saying this to complain about the money, or to hold it over anyone's head. I'm saying it because it becomes relevant to the story I'm telling you. When Becca got pregnant, I cried. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I sat in the parking lot of a grocery store after Elliot called me with the news, and I just let it happen. A grandchild. Something new and alive that would carry a thread of Marilyn forward into the world without even knowing it. I thought about her the whole drive home. I asked Elliot what I could do. He said they were figuring out the nursery. I offered to help. He said he'd get back to me. A few weeks later, Becca's mother called me. I didn't know her well. We'd met at the wedding and exchanged pleasantries at a couple of dinners. Since then, a tall woman named Eloise, who wore a lot of jewelry and had very firm opinions about interior design. She called to let me know that they were planning a baby shower for Becca and that it was going to be held at her house about 4 hours away. We'd love to have you, she said, and I thought nothing of it. Then came the call from Elliot, just her side, her space. I want to tell you that I got angry right away. I didn't. What I felt first was something quieter and more disorienting than anger. Something like being told you've been reading a map upside down the whole time and all the territory you thought you recognized is actually somewhere else entirely. I had been in the picture, or I had thought I was in the picture. I had been to dinners and signed papers and written checks. I had sent birthday cards and driven 200 miles for Thanksgiving and sat across from Becca at holiday tables, trying to find footholds in conversations that seemed to have no purchase. I had tried. I had kept trying. And somehow, in spite of all of that, or maybe without regard to any of it, I was not her space. I didn't say anything to Elliot right away. I sat on it for almost a week, which is my habit when I'm upset. I've learned over the years that the things I say when I'm calm are things I can stand behind later. The things I say when I'm raw are things I usually have to apologize for. So I sat on it, and I thought, and eventually I called him back. I've been thinking about the shower, I said. Dad, I know. Let me finish. I said it gently. I'm not going to make a scene. I'm not going to call Becca and make her feel bad. I just want to understand something. Eloise is going to be there. Her sisters are going to be there. Her friends are going to be there. But her baby's grandfather isn't invited. There was a silence. It's not my decision, he said finally. I know, I said. I'm not asking you to make it. I'm asking you to help me understand it. Another silence. Longer. Becca just feels like you two have never really clicked, he said. And she wanted the shower to feel relaxed. She didn't want anyone there who might make her feel, I don't know, watched. I let that sit in the air between us for a moment. I had watched her, I supposed. I had watched her very carefully, actually, because I was trying to figure out who my son had married. That seemed like a reasonable thing for a father to do. But I understood, in that moment, that it had registered differently to her. that my attention had read as judgment rather than interest. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had judged. I didn't think I had, but I'd been wrong about my own feelings before. "All right," I said. "Tell her I hope she has a wonderful time." I meant it. I want to be clear about that. I meant every word of it. The shower was on a Saturday in October. I knew the date because Eloise had sent me an invitation before Elliot called. The invitation that presumably got cancelled but never quite did. So it sat on my kitchen counter for several weeks like an artifact from a timeline that had been corrected. I spent that Saturday doing the things I do on Saturdays. I cleaned out the garage a little. I made a pot of chili and ate 2 bowls of it for lunch. I watched part of a college football game. I did not think about the shower more than I could help. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman introducing herself as Nadine, a friend of Becca's from college. "Hi, this is Nadine. I got your number from Elliot. I just wanted to say we all had such a lovely time today celebrating Becca. The games were so fun. She really loved the baby book everyone contributed to. I know it was a small gathering, but it felt so special. I hope we get to meet you soon." I stared at that text for a long time. Then I called my son. He picked up on the second ring. In the background, I could hear voices, music, the particular warm ambient noise of a party still in progress. "Hey Dad, good timing, we're just wrapping up." "The shower is today," I said. "A beat." "Yeah," he said. "I told you Nadine texted me. She said you all had a wonderful time." "Yeah, it was great. Becca's really happy." "Elliot," I said. "Is Becca's father there?" A pause that was a fraction of a second too long. "Yeah," he said. "He came down for the weekend." I did not say anything. I counted to 5 in my head. "Her father is there," I said. "Dad, I'm not calling to argue," I said. "I'm calling because I think I now understand the situation clearly, and I want you to know that I understand it. I'm going to go now. I hope Becca had a beautiful day." I hung up, not angrily. I just hung up. I sat in my living room in the dark for a while after that. Not crying, not angry really. Just sitting with the knowledge that had settled into me, like sediment, settling to the bottom of a glass of water. When it settles, the water gets clearer. You can see things you couldn't see before. I was not too rough or too difficult or too different from Becca's social world to be at a celebration for my grandchild. Becca's father was there, and by every account he is a man of similar age and generation and sensibility to me. The variable was not my roughness or my watching or my failure to click. The variable was that I was Elliot's, not hers. About 10 days later, Becca called me. Not Elliot. Becca. She led with about 90 seconds of pleasantries about how the shower had been so sweet, how the nursery was really coming together, how she'd been so tired but feeling grateful. I sat there and I let her talk. I said, "That's wonderful, and I'm so glad in the right places." I waited. Then she said she wanted to talk to me about something. She and Elliot had been going over their finances, and with the baby coming, and some unexpected costs on the apartment. Something about the HVAC and a leak that had turned into a bigger situation. They were looking at a gap of about $15,000 that they were trying to figure out. "We hate to ask," she said, "but you've always been so generous, and we just didn't know who else to turn to." There it was. I want to tell you that I handled what came next with grace and dignity, and that I said exactly the right thing in exactly the right way. I'm not sure I can make that claim. But I'll tell you what I said. "Becca," I said, "I want you to know that I love Elliot very much, and I am going to love that baby more than I have words for. You and I have never quite found our footing with each other, and I've thought a lot about why that is, and I have to accept that some of it is probably on me." She started to say something. I kept going. "But I've been sitting with some things recently. I've been sitting with the fact that I wasn't at the shower. And I've been sitting with the fact that your father was." Silence. "I'm 66 years old," I said. "I have worked for 40 years, and I have tried to be a good father and a good father-in-law, and soon, a good grandfather. And I have been generous. I have been genuinely, freely generous, because I wanted to be. Not because I was keeping score. Lou, I'm almost done," I said. "I'm not going to give you the $15,000, and I want to be honest with you about why, because I think you deserve the truth. It's not that I don't have it. It's that I realized, sitting in my living room 10 days ago, that I've been operating on an assumption that turned out to be wrong. I assumed that the money and the effort and the showing up meant that I was part of this family. I think maybe I'm not. And that's something I can live with. But I can't fund a life I'm not part of." There was a long, long silence. When she spoke, her voice had a different quality to it. Something that might have been the beginning of something real. I never thought about it that way, she said. I know, I said. That's the part that tells me everything. Elliot called me the next morning. I expected anger. I got something else. He said he needed to tell me something, and his voice was tight in the way that means a man is keeping a grip on himself. She told you there were unexpected costs, he said. The HVAC, the leak. That's right. There were some costs, he said. But the main thing is, we've been spending more than we make for a while. Becca's family has money, but they don't give it. They believe in, I don't know, self-sufficiency or something. They've never offered. I should have told you this a long time ago. Elliot, I know, Dad. Why did she call me instead of you calling me? He was quiet for a long time. Because she thought you'd be more likely to say yes if it came from her. That's what she said. I closed my eyes. Son, I said. I need you to hear me. I'm listening. I am your father. I have been your father for 34 years. I have made mistakes, and I have made amends for them, and I have tried to do right by you in every way I knew how. I am not a wallet you turn to when things go sideways. I am a person, and I would very much like to be treated like one. He said, very quietly, that he knew. He said he was sorry. He said it more than once, and the second time he said it, I believed it. We stayed on the phone for about 20 minutes after that. We talked about the monies, some of it. We talked about Becca, a little. We talked about the baby, and his voice changed when we got to that part. It went soft and wondering, the way a man's voice gets when he's standing on the edge of something huge and beautiful and is only just beginning to understand what it means. I'm scared, he said, about being a father, about doing it right. I know, I said. I was scared too. Every good father is. How'd you get through it? I paid attention, I said, to what really mattered and what didn't. And I made a lot of mistakes, but I tried to make sure the same mistake didn't happen twice. He was quiet for a moment. I'm going to do better, Dad. I know you are, I said. I've always known you would. I am not going to tell you that everything is resolved now, because it isn't. Things with Becca are careful and a little formal, the way things are between two people who have said true things to each other and are still figuring out what to do with the truth. She came to my house for dinner last month, the three of them, her and Elliot and the baby, who is almost 3 months old now, and who is the most astonishing thing I have ever seen in my life. She handed the baby to me the way you hand something to someone you're not sure of yet. Carefully, watching, I took him, and I sat down with him in the armchair that used to be Marilyn's, and he looked up at me with those dark eyes that don't know what they're looking at yet, but look at everything anyway. And I thought about 40 years of building a life that didn't look like much from the outside but held weight from the inside. And I thought about Marilyn, who would have known exactly who to be in this moment without having to think about it. I thought about the money, some. I thought about the shower. I thought about her father, who had been welcome where I had not, and about the phone call with Becca, where she'd said she'd never thought about it that way, and about Elliot on the phone the next morning, voice tight, telling me the truth, for possibly the first time in a couple of years. The baby made a small sound, not a cry, just a sound, the way they do, like the world is slightly more than they can hold. I know, I said to him. I know. Becca was watching me from the other side of the room. When I looked up, she looked away, but not before I saw something in her face that I hadn't seen there before. I'm not sure what to call it. Not warmth exactly, not yet, but something adjacent to it, something that might get there, given time and the right conditions. I didn't say I told you so to anyone. Not to Elliot, not to Becca, not even to myself. There's a version of satisfaction that comes from being proven right that I don't much care for anymore. It wears off fast and leaves you feeling smaller than before. What I held on to, sitting there in that chair with my grandson, was something quieter, harder to name. I had drawn a line, not out of cruelty, not out of scorekeeping, out of the simple, stubborn belief that I deserved to be in the room, not because I had paid for the room, but because I had earned the right to be there the slow, ordinary way a man earns things, by showing up, by trying, by getting it wrong and trying again. I am 66 years old. I still have things to learn. But I learned that year that generosity is not the same as access, and that writing checks does not make you family, and that sometimes the clearest thing a man can do for the people he loves is to tell them plainly, without theater and without apology, exactly where he stands. My grandson looked up at me again. His fist found my finger the way they do, that automatic grip, like they're holding on before they know there's anything to hold. I held on back,